Good morning again, everybody. We're continuing our study of Makahanyaharamitsu, Dogen Zenji's second chapter of Shobogenso, and today we are on the part that talks about the monk making prostrations to Prajnaparamita. So I will read that part and then we'll talk about it a bit. So I don't have these paragraphs actually numbered. I hope everybody is able to reference this if you want to. There was a monk in the assembly of Shakyamuni Tathagata. He thought to himself, I should venerate and make prostrations to this most profound Prajnaparamita. Although Prajnaparamita teaches that within all things there is neither arising nor extinguishing, there are practical approaches such as precepts, meditation, wisdom, emancipation, and insight resulting from emancipation. Also, there is a practical approach consisting of the ranks of entering the stream, once returning, non-returning, and arhat. Also, self-awakening is a practical approach. Unsurpassable, perfect awakening is also a practical approach. Turning the wondrous Dharma wheel, saving various sentient beings, is also a practical approach. The Buddha knew the monk's thoughts. So it is. The most profound Prajnaparamita is indeed subtle and difficult to fathom. So again, here's a point where we might think we know Dogen Zenji's teachings or what he's been saying, but then it seems to go in the opposite direction, or he kind of pulls the rug out from underneath us again in a certain way. Unless we study a bit more deeply what might be our first impression here. So first of all, this monk, this paragraph about the monk is apparently a paragraph that's quoted from the 600-volume Prajnaparamita Sutra. So it's not like Dogen Zenji just made this up and stuck it in here. This is from the larger the large, 600 volume. I couldn't find an English translation of that anywhere. If anybody knows of one, let me know. My teacher quoted this in his commentary, but he's able to read, the Chinese and Japanese version, but I could not find it in English. But so this monk thought to himself, I should venerate and make prostrations to this most profound Prajnaparamita. So this is a kind of, I think it's a really important part in a way. So this, venerating and making prostrations, of course, making prostrations and bowing in Zen and, most of Buddhism, as far as I know, is a very important and fundamental practice. So I think, I've been thinking about what this really means and why Dogen Zenji would put it here or why he would, quote this part of the Prajnaparamita Sutra. And I think part of the thing that's being communicated here is about ceremonies and making our zazen manifest off of the cushion, for example, which is, to me, what making prostrations is. It's a kind of, ceremony in a way. It's a formal thing that we do, usually to, a Buddha statue or maybe a teacher or some revered thing. And There's a chapter of Shobogenzo about making prostrations and attaining the marrow, making prostrations. This goes back to the earliest kind of legendary time of Zen where, the Bodhidharma's 5 or 6 disciples, he was going to transmit the Dharma and he was sort of asking each person for their understanding, and each one of them gave their understanding. And the first one, I think he said, "You have attained my skin." And the second one said something, "You have attained my flesh." I can't. I should have reviewed this story. Actually, I can't remember exactly all the different levels of attainment. And the next one was, "You have attained my bone." And it's either the fourth or fifth one. He told, Huiko, the second ancestor, "You have attained my marrow," because all he did was make a prostration to to Bodhidharma to display his understanding of the Dharma. That was, sort of his answer to the question of, what is this, or what is the Dharma? So Dogen Zenji's commentary on it actually was different than you might expect, and he was saying that each of those levels of attainment are itself the wholeness of the Dharma. We might think that we only, if we obtain the marrow, that is the only time that we, express the Dharma. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I wasn't going to talk about that because there's a lot to it. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about, making prostrations. And Dogen Zenji's wrote a waka poem called Prostration. So Dogen Zenji is considered a great poet. In addition to being, a Zen master, his poetry is cherished as a, national treasure in Japan. But this poem goes, "Grasses lie unseen in the field under snow. The white egret hides itself in its own appearance." So that is making a prostration. The field of grass and snow, everything is white, completely white. And within that whiteness, the bird, this white colored bird, is there, and yet we can't see it. From Russ. Okay, you want me to read that again? Maybe I should have made a copy of this for the screen, but it goes like this: "Grasses lie unseen in the field under snow. The white egret hides itself in its own appearance." So it's the snow, it's the wintertime, and snow is covering the ground and the grass, and there's an egret there, simply being an egret. And yet the bird is 100% there, and yet it's hidden, or it's there and not there. So this is something about, um, practice and the universal and individual truth. So we go beyond either this individual self or this universal self. So the snow, the whiteness, the snow that covers everything equally is a symbol, of unity. That's in a Zen symbol of snow. Sometimes it's darkness or night. Sometimes it's white. Snow blankets everything indiscriminately. It doesn't say, I'm not going to cover this thing or that thing. It falls on all beings. It's sort of like a Dharma rain, in Lotus Sutra. The rain doesn't discriminate against any being. It's also magnanimous mind, the mountain that welcomes all beings. So the bird is there, manifesting the bird, yet hidden in the snow. There's no, you can't see the bird, and yet um, it's there and it isn't there. So when we make a prostration, we have to do something. We practice and we make a prostration, and so our individuality is 100% there and dependent on practice. And yet, in that moment of practice, we manifest completely the universal reality beyond the individual. So both and neither and none. None of the four arguments apply. Like these four arguments that the Buddha negated. Um, you know, from one perspective, we're there and manifesting and bowing but when we actually do the bow, we disappear. It's beyond our individual desire and our individual being, the way that we're supported to do the bow and the boundaries that drop away when we bow. We just 100% completely bow in this moment. So I'm going to read some more poems that might illustrate this teaching. So when Nojo Zenji and Dogen Zenji were meeting in China, in Nojo Zenji's quarters, it was a very intimate meeting where, Nyojo Zenji explained the Dharma to Dogen Zenji, and he first understood the Dharma. Anyway, so he was asking him questions, and Dogen Zenji would bow to his teacher after he received, some understanding from him. And Nyojo Zenji, Dogen Zenji's teacher, when Dogen Zenji bowed, he said, as for their nature, the person who makes a prostration and the person who receives it are empty and serene. The correspondence and interpenetration of the way between them is beyond comprehension. So the person who makes a prostration and the person who receives it are empty and serene. So this monk is saying he's making a prostration to all beings. That's what we're really doing. That's what we do when we make a prostration to the Buddha statue or to our teacher, or to, anything really, if we do it sincerely as a practice of our, extension of our Zazen practice. But I think it has something to do, with what Dogen Zenji is saying here in this fascicle. I wonder if I'll have time to talk about the rest of these things, but that this practical approach of bowing, doing something in the world, with the body, is bringing our Zazen practice, or allowing, manifesting Genjo, our bowing practice realizes the entirety beyond the individual and beyond the universal. So, and this has something to do with the reason that we do ceremonies in my mind. The way, after sesshin at Gyobutsuji, we go out and we make prostrations to the Buddha statue. It's one part of, we don't do ceremonies at Gyobutsuji. This is in the style of the tradition of, Antaiji, which was very non-traditional Zen practice. But we could, talk more about why. But they don't do any ceremonies. They just focus on zazen. So the only real ceremonies we really do at Gyobutsuji are, occasionally we'll do something, but we'll do a my mind is we'll do honoring a person's death or I can't think of the word, a memorial service. We'll do a memorial service, or if somebody passes away, or we do meal ceremonies somewhat. We do some chanting there, and then we do some bows after sesshin. But we don't do any elaborate kind of chanting, or especially, kind of more elaborate ceremonies that involve a lot of technical stuff. But, and there's a reason for that, but we still, I guess the point of this is that the one thing I do miss is the bowing practice that we usually do during morning service. So you do 3 bows at the beginning, and then you at least 3 at the end. And in a full ceremony, you do more bowing in the middle too, sometimes. But depending on what ceremony it is, actually not during morning service. But the doshir, I go in the morning and do bows, before the morning greeting. So we do still do some bowing practice, but in this practice of embodying, saying, let me go back here. When we do a prostration, we go onto the ground. We put our body low to the ground, and we lift our hands up, and that is the origin of that is supposedly lifting up the feet of Buddha above our head. But so we symbolically are saying this reality, that we're bowing to, this Prajnaparamita, is boundless, and I offer up my individual self to it. This is way bigger than my individual desires, or my individual perspectives, or my individual thinking, or concepts, or understanding of the Dharma. This is why Bodhidharma said that his disciple had attained such a deep realization through doing a bow to his teacher. So we go beyond this individual kind of perspective, or this place that we're usually so imprisoned in our own kind of world of individuality and our own preferences being the center of the universe. And we actively say, this thing is higher, than me. And this thing, we are it. This Prajnaparamita, we manifest it and are one with it. And yet we can only manifest it through our individuality, through completely being one with our individuality, the kind of contradiction, through wholeheartedly putting everything, all of our body and mind, into the bow in that moment. Let's see. So this is part of what Nyojo Zenji was saying when Dogen Zenji bowed to him. the interpenetration of the way between them. The way is itself this reality. The interpenetration. So, just one other poem about bowing. This is a famous poem you may have heard of too. It was Uchamaroshi's last poem. All his life he was writing poems to uh, try to express his understanding of the Dharma, and he wrote this poem on the last day of his life. And he said he thought that he finally had expressed what he'd been trying to express all of those years. He was trying to sum up his understanding of the Buddha Dharma. And he wrote this. This was kind of his death poem. It was the last thing he wrote the day that he died. So he said, it's just bow, putting my right and left hands together as one. I just bow. Just bow to become one with Buddha and God. Just bow to become one with everything I encounter. Just bow to become one with all the myriad things. Just bow as life becomes life. So, when Nichama Roshi was this age, he couldn't sit zazen anymore. He was very weak, and he did bowing practice, and he also chanted the name of Avalokiteshvara. And he famously said, I often say that he said that doing Nembutsu or chanting Buddha's name was doing zazen with the mouth, and that doing zazen was chanting the name of Buddha with the body. So, I don't remember him saying it, but he probably would have said the same about bowing. In this, bowing is zazen or done with the body in the form of a bow, in the form of an active form of doing a bow. So, um, just bow as life becomes life. He liked to talk about that, the Dharma, as just the kind of life force or life activity becoming itself. So nothing special, but usually we're kind of in a diluted state where, we're not in the natural state of being. We need to practice. So a bird, like flying with this entire sky, they can do that. They just do it. A bee getting honey or gathering pollen is circulating this life of interconnection, just being a bee. But just bowing is a human being, just being a human being, or just sitting, or just making offerings to our Dharma friends or to all beings, any wholesome activity in following precepts, offering or the Dharma or offering material things or, um, you know, any wholesome activity done 100% is just being a mature human being and allowing life to express life. Nothing special, not, that's why he doesn't, Dogen Zenji, we didn't like these big awakening experiences where someone becomes a great master that's better than everyone else, although, Dogen Zenji did talk about great masters, and he had a deep respect, of course, for those great masters. So it's the other side, kind of the other side of what he's trying to express here. So, I tell the story of how I really had a deep experience with bowing practice. I won't really say it again so much in detail, but I had some real deep resentment that I had for some people at some point in my practice. I felt like I couldn't let it go. And um, finally, at some point, just decided I was going to bow to these people. I actually was bowing to a image of Avalokiteshvara and in my heart, trying to just let go and wish these people well. So I was very, very deluded, very much caught and unable to just let that go. In Zazen, it's fine. We can let it go, but we get up off the cushion sometimes and it plagues us in that situation with me. Everything I saw it seemed like through the color of resentment, the glasses kind of, the, you know, the, the vision of resentment or victimization that I couldn't seem to go beyond. Um, and that's suffering. In any moment of practice, we realize awakening. It's true. In Zazen, we realize the complete end of suffering or nirvana or realization. And yet we need some relief. Human beings, we get off the cushion, we start interacting with people, and we have suffering. We create it for ourselves and we bring it to others unless we address it, unless we address cause and effect. And so, in this instance, I did this bowing practice for several weeks, and it was sort of difficult at first, but by the time I finished, I felt really free of this resentment for these people. It's really a bizarre kind of, not bizarre isn't the right word, but kind of an amazing thing to me, that um, this could happen. And I think, a really important part of that is what I tried not to do it after a while. I wasn't doing it in order to get something, get a result, but I needed a direction to walk in. This is what Dogen Zenji, I think, is talking about in this part of the fascicle. And I'm not sure if I should take the time to talk about the rest of it or not, because that's where he really starts talking about these practical approaches. So any moment we can realize complete awakening, and yet we need a direction as a deluded, small piece of human life with a very limited view. We need a direction to walk in. But the goal is not the point, it's the walking in this moment. But we need a map. But often, if we're not careful, we confuse the map with the reality right now that is the real territory that we need to express awakening. And the kind of the irony is I think, when we give up this kind of hope to become enlightened or be relieved of our suffering, those are the times when often we're released from it. So, in that bowing practice, it was like I really kind of gotten to the point where I was about to give up, or I just was exasperated, and I was like, I don't know what else to do. I didn't have any money for years of psychotherapy. I was a training monk. Maybe that would have worked. I don't know. And worked. What does that mean? But somehow this kind of exasperation and a kind of surrender, like I can't do this. I cannot do this. I cannot let go of this. I'm deeply deluded, and yet I feel deep resentment. A part of it is admitting sometimes we want to be a good Buddhist to ourselves or to others, and we don't want to admit, I feel like mean right now, and I feel resentful, or I feel judgmental, but unless we do that, unless we receive that, we can't let that go. I think that was a big part of why this particular practice was so profound, was that, there's a complete acceptance and also sort of a lack of expectation that I can work it out myself, and a kind of, real sort of surrender to whatever, the moment. So before long doing the practice, I was enjoying it and doing it for its own sake, um, and not doing it, to try to get something else rather than just doing that thing for the moment. And there was no way, I could make that happen. It's not self power where somehow our willpower enables us to do that, but the bowing, this kind of letting go itself, the kind of whatever yogic activity or whatever you want to call it, um, is the thing that, this entirety of this universe. So when we're really saying, something like this, where we feel so stuck in our own particular view, and so in some way, really I think that we're wronged deeply, and there might be some conventional way through the lens of society that we were wronged. We can't beat people or kill people or try or break the law and say, well, it's empty. So but even if someone does abuse us in some deep way, if we don't find some way to come to terms with that, beyond a conventional way, beyond getting revenge or beyond just being stuck in victimization, we really suffer, and we spread this suffering of others. I think one of the most dangerous viewpoints today is the viewpoint of victimization. It's to see one's group in group or one's um, perspective as the kind of perspective of victimization. And it doesn't mean there are no victims, or there's no justice or injustice, but for there to be a victim, there has to be a perpetrator that often, in taking this viewpoint, is beyond, beyond repair, or needs to be gotten rid of or somehow eliminated or changed in the way that we think that they need to be changed. So um, I'm just talking about on a spiritual level, of course, for lack of a better word. This isn't a healthy approach. From a conventional level, we need to recognize cause and effect, and people who have been done wrong by, and the people that are doing that it needs to be addressed, these kinds of issues. But if we don't do it on the basis of wisdom, this becomes deep delusion. If our foundation for approaching these kinds of uh, problems aren't based on wisdom, we just perpetrate this kind of samsaric cycle of retribution and victimization and retribution, because that's really samsara, the subject object relationship that we invest in, and the cycle of violence and retribution, and one party gets in power, and for a while, the next year the other party gets in power, and we may think of one viewpoint as more just than the other, and that's true. Yet if you know if the cycle of battle, of conflict and otherization or objectification isn't addressed, sooner or later, the people that we consider to be the enemy will come in power again. Anyway, I kind of got off onto something I didn't want or plan to do, but this is the kind of thing that we need to understand in terms of our practice and letting go of our own perspective as absolute reality, and allowing our perspective to be informed by the wisdom beyond our own viewpoint. So, and I think that's has a large to do with what Dogen Zenji is saying in this next part. So, I'm not sure how much I should say here, how much I should go on. Actually, I don't want to go on with this for weeks and weeks, but I'm not sure if I really can say what I want to say here in just a few minutes. Okay, I guess I'll stop here. Um, yeah, I guess I'll just stop here because I think there's too much to say here, and I want to talk about the rest of this section as one piece. So maybe we'll have a bit shorter talk today, I guess. But I think I should probably stop. I went in too long about the bowing practice, so we'll stop it there. Um, all right. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say this morning? Any comments or observations about this?
I thought personally, I thought you were on a roll. I would like to hear you say more, if you feel to do so.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Dakota. I appreciate that. Well, Russ, let's see. Maybe Russ has an idea about that too.
I didn't quite pick up on what Dakota was saying. He was breaking up a little bit.
Well, he said he wouldn't mind if I kept going, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But
yeah, I'd say go for it. I agree.
Okay, well, all right. So I guess if anybody needs to drop out, go ahead. But maybe I can break this up into more than 1 week too. I won't be giving a talk on this next week as part of the deal. I'm giving a talk at my mind, the Zen Tejo Munich's monastery, and I can't think of in the moment right now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My mind is failing me more than usual this morning. But
Is it Great Tree?
yes, thank you.
I may have it wrong. Is it Great Tree?
Yes, thank you, Dakota. Great Tree Monastery. So I'll be giving a talk there. Okay, well, I'll go on a little bit more then about this at least. So the next part of the fascicle says, although Prajna Paramita teaches that within all things there is neither arising nor extinguishing, there are practical approaches that are attainable, such as precepts, meditation, wisdom, emancipation, and insight from emancipation. So this is kind of interesting because this word, practical approaches that are attainable, they're actually in the copy that we have, that are attainable is not there. In the copy that my teacher included with his commentary, it is there. So I would like to actually ask him why he changed, the word, because it may be that there's some implication that he thought, it wasn't such a great translation anymore. But this word is, a Japanese word it's a Zen term, shietsu katoku. That means it's like a well-known Zen term, in Japan that is applied to things like koan practice or things that people do in order to attain understanding in their practice. So, it's kind of interesting that he changed the word to not include attainable. But anyway, I would have to ask him exactly why. But maybe we'll get sort of an inkling of why. So, of course, precepts, meditation, and wisdom are the foundational practice of Buddhism. That these are the kind of three areas of practice that we as Buddhists undertake. And, if we don't have those practices, where are we? What practice do we have? So the basic thing that we're doing now, talking about the Dharma, studying the Dharma, is a practical approach, is something, that we can do off of the cushion. And actually, this entire phrase, precepts, meditation, wisdom, emancipation, and insight resulting from emancipation, is another Zen word, Gobun Hoshin. So this is a basic, these are the kind of attributes, apparently, of a person who's attained enlightenment. In Mahayana Buddhism, an arhat or a Buddha is said to have these kind of 5 attributes. It's the 5-fold merit of the Dharma body, the Dharmakaya, has these 5 attributes. So it's kind of interesting, this, to say it as the Dharma body, the body that has no attributes, has these attributes. So, if we go on to this next part and really study what it's saying there's all of these different levels of attainment that are practical approaches that we can do in the world. And we usually think of Dogen Zenji's teaching as saying, there's nothing but this moment. There's no kind of level of attainment. There's no way to measure our progress. It's only, this moment that we can manifest complete awakening. And yet, and I think that's true. And yet, if we don't have some kind of map or some place to walk towards, as I was saying earlier, we're lost. And if we don't understand that this cause and effect that the Buddha taught, if we talk about the different levels of attainment, for example, this is a kind of early teaching on cause and effect. We do something, and then something else happens, and we are relieved of our suffering. But if we, if we don't take this reality of cause and effect seriously, we have no way to practice. There's no way to do anything. So, for example, this piece about complete perfect awakening, Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, just earlier in the piece, he said, of course, that Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is only this awakening, all beings coming together to awaken in this moment, as if the same as in the bowing practice. And yet, if we don't say that there's something called Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, and we don't say there is this individual, we have no way to practice. So, we say, I am bowing to you. And it's a kind of lie, or it's a kind of fiction, or I am bowing to Prajna Paramita. But in the reality, the Heart Sutra teaches there's no individual self and there's no object that we're bowing to. And yet, if we don't accept those kind of objective realities, we have no way as a human being to practice. So, in the actual act of bowing, we go beyond this individual perspective and realize we're completely one with this subject object relationship. So, I think about, we can talk about sort of letting go or opening the hand of thought as kind of unleashing or letting go of our grasping. But there's another way, we can talk about the relationship that we go beyond too, and that is becoming one with it, is kind of a way that's talked about in Zen. And I think in bowing practice, this is really apparent that we become one with our bow, and through that we become one with the entirety of the universe that's supporting that bow and allowing us to express our practice in that moment. And we become one with the object, and yet the object is there and yet it's not there. It's like the white heron in the snow, the individuality and the universal completely manifesting each other. So I think the point is that we often misinterpret Dogen Zenji's teaching and say, there's no kind of cause and effect. So there's kind of two aspects, I think, to his teaching. And one is that any moment is Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, when we're completely one with it in our whole body and mind. And yet, we need to study cause and effect in order to better address our suffering and to address the suffering of all beings. But we can only do that in the present moment. If we try to reach a goal, if we say our practice is we're doing it in order to become this kind of better person or reach this kind of goal, we're completely outside of the way, because there is no individual person that can do it. Of course, over and over again we go around this cycle of of the individual and the universal perspective. So I actually put this into a document again. I'll make a few comments about the things that he says here. Also, there's a practical approach consisting of the ranks of entering the stream, once returning, non-returning, and arhat. So, of course, these are so-called, Shravaka teachings, or the early teachings, of early Buddhism. He says there's also self-awakening is a practical approach. And this is a reference to Pratyeka Buddha. They're said that there, in the Lotus Sutra, there are these three vehicles. And the other one is the Bodhisattva vehicle. Unsurpassable perfect awakening is also a practical approach. So he's giving a kind of a nod here to the Lotus Sutra and the chapter, I think, on skillful means. And so, I won't have to go over that, but basically the thing is that, Buddha kind of told these people in the burning house a lie, a sort of white lie, to get out of the burning house. He was promising them something that they wanted, that they could understand, in order to get them out of the house, because they were in the house burning, the burning house, playing with toys. That's where Uchama Roshi, got his saying, "Sesshin without toys," or we play with toys all of our life. We can make Buddhism our toy, So the Buddha kind of told these people they were going to get something in order to get them out of the house, because they couldn't understand anything else. And when they get out of the house, they get something that they couldn't understand, something more beautiful and deep, the one vehicle, of all beings, or the entirety of everything as this reality. So we'll probably study that parable more, but this is a kind of a reference to that. So one of the toys, one of the groups of toys was this Shravaka vehicle, this idea that there's Buddhas that awaken by themselves and they don't teach. And that there's that's the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle. And then there's the Shravakas, the people who hear the voice of the Buddha and practice for their own awakening and become arhats. And then there's the Bodhisattva vehicle, the Bodhisattva vehicle that we're studying now. We study, we keep coming back to samsara in order to allow everyone to awaken before us. And, the teaching was that this one vehicle goes beyond any of those three vehicles and is the totality of all of them, But the point, I think, Dogen Zenji's making here is that it's getting those skillful means are an expression of the one vehicle. It's not like the one vehicle is only valid when they come out of the house, or when when we reach some goal or want some reality truer than the reality of the burning house. But actually, those skillful means themselves are part of the one vehicle, of course. There's no, that's kind of the point of the parable, is that if we really practice, everything is teaching and expressing this deep reality in the realm of cause and effect. So, some people are not going to me, it's one of the places where there's a real kind of broad teaching. Some people are not going to respond to Zen, and some people are not going to respond to Buddhism, really. And if we say those people are lost and are never will attain awakening, that's kind of the problem. It's a big problem. And but we can understand and respect and see those people as, of course, an expression of awakening and their path, and we bow to that path. So the triple treasure of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha is also a practical approach. And we could talk about this one forever, but Dogen Zenji said there were three types of three treasures in his Kyoju Kaimon, actually. Eijo recorded that, his commentary on the precepts. And this, absolute three treasures, there's the Buddha treasure of all, we can see all beings as Buddha, the entirety of the universe as Buddha, as one thing. We can see the entirety of the universe as all beings, the Sangha of all beings, or the activity or the teaching, all the entirety of the universe is teaching the Dharma, is the Dharma itself. But from these absolute perspectives, everything, thing is part of the Sangha. There's really no Sangha because, the Sangha is thought of as a community of people who are expressing the Dharma and supporting the Dharma together. But from this absolute perspective, you can't say there's really any Sangha if everyone's in it. But, of course, that's what he says. But that's one kind of understanding that goes beyond this kind of, perspective of subject and object, self and other, and practical approaches and complete awakening in this moment. So, turning the wondrous Dharma wheel, saving various sentient beings is also a practical approach. So, even in the Diamond Sutras, the Buddha says, "Does the Buddha save any sentient beings, Subhuti?" And Subhuti says, "No. Therefore, you do save sentient beings." So this is the kind of same, pattern that we've been talking about before. Things are as they are, subject-object relationship, and yet they're not there. And we approach them as part of the self, and therefore we approach them with the mind of the bodhisattva of compassion. We say they are there. And that's what we're able to say they are there as a practical approach. Okay, so I've gone over this kind of more quickly than I was planning to. The last line here, the Buddha knew the monk's thoughts, so it is, so it is. The most profound prajna paramita is indeed subtle and difficult to fathom. So, difficult to fathom. I added some to our chart. We've been using these charts over the last few weeks. And let's see if I can bring it up again. This is another version of it. Let's see. So I've put different parts of this prajna paramita, Makahanyaharamitsu, into this, into this chart. So there's always existence, non-existence, and the middle way. This, of course, is referring to the Kachayana Sutta. So, this is basically how I think, this fits into this chart. So it's good to be reminded, this existence, non-existence, middle way. So, existence is usually where we think of cause and effect taking place. We can't have a cause if we don't believe in separate beings or in the subject-object relationship, and we cannot have an effect on the object. And yet, if we don't understand that those things are impermanent, there's no cause and effect either. So cause and effect and impermanence completely interpenetrate each other. So to say, that there are precepts, meditation, wisdom, and so forth, you cannot really say that there's any cause and effect between these aspects of the Dharma unless you say there aren't any. A person is not able to change unless we say that person really isn't real. Unless we say that person is impermanent, there's no way they can change. If they're permanently the way they are, there's no way that we can awaken or that person can awaken. So unless we say there is and there is not, there's no Buddhism. And so that's why we say there is again here. But this is the understanding of prajna paramita. Or this is, we can say maybe, we can say this is the map, this existence, and this is the territory, really. If we just meet this moment completely as the self, there's no self and other, there's no subject and object, there's nowhere to go, nothing to do. So this is the real territory of our life. We think that we know that there were cats fighting behind the door this morning during Zazen. I don't know if you guys heard that, but there were cats fighting. Our Zazen includes animals a lot at Kibutsuji. They're just the way it is. But really, we might have seen a picture of cats in our mind fighting, and we were sure that there were cats there fighting. But actually, all we received was the sound of cats fighting, and that produced an image. But we really believe in that image, but we're really fooled by that image because we don't know that was cats. We can see this in magic shows. Our senses are fooled. That's why it's so amazing why we enjoy being fooled sometimes. Somebody could have been back there playing, it's far-fetched. Somebody could have been back there playing a recording of cats fighting. But if we're fooled into thinking, there were cats there fighting, it's a problem. If we're fooled into thinking there were no cats there fighting, we have another problem. I hope this is making it understandable because in the realm of no map, there was no way to say there was any cats there. We would never. This is just some stimulation that we have, but it's the self, it's only the self, and there's nothing we can do to address it, or there's no reason to address it. So this is kind of the map that we use of reality, and the reality itself is beyond any distinguishing of subject and object. So if we don't use this map, we have a real problem. But if we grasp this map and confuse it for this second part, the self beyond subject and object, we confuse it for reality itself. The image of the cats, we think there really were cats there, when in fact there really is only the self. So this is what I think Dogen Zenji, is trying to say here. This is my understanding anyway of what he's trying to say. So the same thing, the kind of, unless we understand that there is some progress, that it's better to be kind than to be mean and abusive, that's cause and effect. If we don't try to become more kind and open-hearted, as the precepts, manifest, say that we should manifest, we have a problem. Anything goes. This is kind of the original Enlightenment teaching. But if we get stuck in saying that we know these precepts are the reality, we have no way to actually face the reality in front of us fluidly. We judge other people who don't see the world the way we do. And sometimes compassion means doing something that would otherwise be considered mean in a different context. We can think of examples like that of having to harm somebody in order to save them from causing harm. It's a question. It's a big question. Sometimes telling someone something difficult that seems harmful, tell them criticize them in some way. To do that in the service of compassion, sometimes we have to do that. And we try to do it in the most kind way we can, but sometimes we have to do that. We can't always use perfect speech. If we say that I can't tell this person something critical because I don't want to use bad speech, or I only want to use kind speech. Is it really kind speech? So, if the Buddha didn't say, I'm going to teach and I'm going to turn the Dharma wheel because they don't really exist, there would be no Buddhism. And yet, if we get caught in this kind of way of seeing the Buddha as something special that was outside or separate from this universe, how can we relate to that? How do we have any hope of really, if it's only awakening is only available to a select number of people that practice in a certain way for many kalpas? Is kind of, to me, it's not a very hopeful teaching. But to understand that the Buddha and his awakening are the manifestation of this entirety is a much more hopeful, to me, much more hopeful, practical, and realistic way. The Buddha wouldn't have been able to practice without, I like to tell this story about Sujata, who gave him the milk, the rice milk on the, before his so-called, awakening. And he hadn't been eating for years. I think they said it was 6 years. He hadn't, he'd only eaten a very small amount of food, and he had to have some nourishment in order to practice. And Sujata saw him and offered him this meal that enabled him to practice and sit zazen and awaken. And not only her practice, but the cows that made that milk were part of his practice. And the rice that went into that food is a product of all things of the earth and the sun and the soil. So all things in that, even in that particular moment, any particular moment, we can see all things participate in awakening. But especially this moment where it kind of really illustrates that Sujata, she the kind of the entirety of this we think of it in terms of like the sake of the rest of the world. The Buddha's kind of like gave people this medicine to end suffering. The entirety of that depended on one person offering him some nourishment, and it was just one act of kindness or practice or awareness that allowed all of this, maybe 2,000 years of tradition, 2,500 years, because of one person seeing what needed to be done in the moment. This is Dogen Zenji's teaching. Each moment, even though it's a tiny drop in the universe, is everything depends on it. So, okay. All right. So it is late, and I should stop here. But I think you see the idea here again. The practical approach, the map and the territory become one and go beyond oneness or two-ness. Unless we address cause and effect, there's no practice. And if we attach to cause and effect as a goal, we're as far away from the way as heaven is from earth, because awakening only happens now. Okay, well, I'll stop here, and it is late, so I'm sorry about that, and see if anybody has anything they'd like to say. See, Dakota, you had something? Or yeah, okay.
Yeah, I appreciate you very much. Can you hear me? Is the audio coming on clearly?
See if that's better. It's a little muffled, but I put the microphone next to the speaker, and maybe that will help for others to hear.
Actually, I may know the issue. Let me switch over from. How does it sound now? A little bit better?
Yes, that sounds better.
All right. Nice and clear. I really appreciate this talk in particular. I don't know if you were like running parallel with my mind and what I've been dealing with lately and the insights that have been coming up for me in my studies, but it's I'm just going to get to it because I could go in so many directions with everything that you said, but this whole didn't the Buddha jump up and explain that the entire universe came together, and then basically he jumped up and explained that the entire universe was enlightened in that moment. He declared the enlightenment of all beings whenever he attained his own enlightenment. Is that true?
Well, that's the kind of Zen account. So whether it's probably not historically true.
What were you saying?
It's probably not historically true, but the Zen account does say that he looked up at the morning star and said, "I, together with all beings, attain the way." And it's a very important teaching. Often when something isn't historically true, it's making a point that's more important than what could be expressed by historical fact. So
Even more important.
right. Right.
And for me, it cleared up a lot of the confusion in Zen text that we've been studying and I've been looking into on my own. In a very simple way, that the entire universe did come together in light with the cow, the milk, the bacteria in the milk, the entire microbiome. It makes all of that possible, and the neuropeptides that are created in the Buddha's gut that gave him the mental secretions that Uchiyama Roshi would call it, that led to this insight that actually it didn't. And it's just that simple. It's kind of like a power moment. I feel like firecrackers are going off in my head right now, so I apologize if I'm hard to follow. But really, that happened at the end. That happened towards the end of the talk. Towards the middle of the talk, I really began to. I want to check my understanding of the section where Indra is talking to Buddha, and he's asking, "Do you see any way that I can save these beings? Do you see? Um, are there any methods can be saved?" And he said, basically, if they act in accordance with what you said, and they're walking the path, basically these are people. We're talking about people here that don't wish to be free from suffering. They've seen that insight. It's like when Ryokan said that he vowed never to seek outside of himself again. He looked into a pond and saw his reflection. He said, "I vow never again to seek outside of myself, for at that moment I'm far away." So basically, Buddha answers back and he's like, "We're talking about people. You want to save these people, but we're talking about people who have seen beyond suffering. They don't even wish for their own. They don't even wish for the cessation of suffering anymore. So technically speaking, there's nothing that, even though there is suffering, there are beings. There's nothing to save them from because they've attained insight." I feel like I'm rambling. I'm just gonna give the floor to you. I just wanted to check my understanding, my half-baked understanding.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of an important teaching, is that from a certain perspective, that's what liberates us, is that we know that we're actually not in bondage, or we know um, that sentient beings aren't in bondage, that they're, from a certain perspective, everything is okay. And that gives us hope and strength to face the world. And once I think we do that, then we see from this other perspective that actually people are suffering, even though their suffering isn't real. On a basic human level, our heart opens to people in the moment. I think that's what that encounter between Indra and the Buddha was, him, to me, his heart opening. He just comes to this profound realization, and it's like, all I have to do is kick back, and nothing, I don't need to do anymore. It's done. And the more he settles into that, the more he understands that actually there are people that are suffering, that there are some people that will benefit from his teaching, and it's worth making the effort. But part of the freedom is knowing that ultimately everything is okay. But it's kind of a cold-hearted thing to say, well, it doesn't matter. Everything's impermanent and the suffering isn't real. So though I'm not going to worry about those people. Human beings, they care. I mean, a mature human being, I think that's showing us what it means to be a mature adult. it means that, once we're okay, even if we're okay, we know that if there is suffering in the world, we can't be okay. So yeah, without both of these perspectives, though, it's, very difficult. If we stay in either one of those perspectives, we have a problem.
It seems that he's saying to Indra this very quickly, not in any cold-hearted way. If you kind of read between the lines, like you're saying, it seems as though he's telling Indra, "You've got, man, you have this heart-opening experience, so just keep doing what you're doing, and in keeping on doing what you're doing, knowing that these people are following in this example that you're setting by asking those questions, by uh, just to put it in Buddhist jargon, awakening Bodhisattva, so to speak. They've got it too. They've all got it, and it's all right. But at the same time, keep on. And that again can be understood as him emphasizing practice, the continuation of practice, even after the.
Yeah. I think that's where the bodhisattva ideal comes from, is we see what the Buddha actually did. We see what he kept teaching, even after he was so, awakened. And that's where the bodhisattva ideal, comes from, I think. So I was just really quickly, I was studying this, fascicle of my teacher, the Shobogenzo Hotsubodai Shin, Arousing Bodhi Mind. And he was talking about the original Jataka tale, where the Buddha in a previous lifetime meets Dikampara Buddha. And when he meets him, the story goes, he had to lay down his hair over the mud for the Buddha to cross because he couldn't fix the road for him quickly enough. But he vowed in that moment to keep, he said that he could have gone to a monastery and become an arhat, in this past lifetime. But he vowed to keep coming back so that he could become a Buddha, over and over again to save sentient beings. So that's from the early Pali text. That's not Mahayana teaching. That it's exactly what the Buddha vowed to do. He could have left samsara at any time, but this was when he first aroused bodhicitta. So yes. Anyway, it's fascinating, to me, that Mahayana Buddhism is, it's really not an innovation. As a way, it's kind of, we look at it as a sort of departing from the Buddha's teaching, or expounding or expanding on it, but it's really, to me, keeping the Buddha's basic teaching. But okay, Russ had something.
Unmuted. Lower my hand. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I think you have. I need to make no apologies for not going very fast through this. I think you are following very nicely in the footsteps of your teacher. Oji-san has been. I think he was going to just get through the last chapter of Uchiyama Roshi's Opening the Hand of Thought before he retired. And I think so far he's probably on page 2 of the chapters. So
After about 50 years,
following in the footsteps, I think.
Okay.
So, anyway, but you said something about becoming one with our bow, and we're bowing. It's the entire practice. But now I lost it. Oh, okay. So, as I'm bowing, hang on a second. I need to tell my wife something. Kathy Bruner had. So, at any rate, so as I'm bowing, I will all of a sudden notice my not being there, or as we're reciting the four vows in the morning, I'll have in the period of chanting that 3 times in a row, I'll have 50 different thoughts coming into my mind. Oh, geez, I got to go up. I got to answer this message. Oh my God, we got a meeting. I got a plan. Resentful about something that somebody said last night. And so when you talk about a bow being a perfect expression, my bow often doesn't feel like very much of a perfect expression. And so I kind of I used to really wrestle with that and say, well, it's not a real bow. It's not authentic because my mind was elsewhere. It can't be an expression of Buddhism because I was, it was imperfect. My mind was elsewhere. I guess you can view it as thinking of your mind being elsewhere is just part of the reality of it. I mean, this is our reality that we are going to both be bowing and trying to express that perfect reality, but at the same time, we're human beings and are not going to really hit perfect reality. So is that am I on the right track with this? Am I totally screwed up? I've always been afraid that a Zen teacher would say, "Oh man, forget it. You're totally screwed up. Go try another practice."
No, no, I don't think you're totally screwed up for sure, Russ.
Appreciate that.
Neither does the ultimate reality. I'm sure, but I can't speak for it. So you can ask. But I mean, a few things occur to me, and this is my understanding, sort of the beauty, of Dogen Zenji's teaching, is that for one thing, when we're doing zazen or when we're doing the bow, and when we realize that we have these thoughts come up and that we're not there, then we have the moment, the opportunity to awaken. So we just come back when we realize that these things are distracting us. We have the opportunity to just come back to our bow. It might be a split second, but in that split second is complete awakening. So it's the kind of beautiful thing about his teaching. He's very, very tough, but he's also very, very compassionate. Both of these things, like the entire universe depends on you this moment, get with it. But you have another chance, and keep doing it over and over again. We don't actually know when we hit the mark either. We talked about this during Jiju Mai. Knowing is something really beyond, to me, in my understanding. The regular way of knowing is not the point. But we often know when we're not there, it's true. But to know that we are there is kind of a contradiction, because then we're in that subject-object relationship. We're really invested in that subject-object relationship. But just so we can just be there completely and enjoy the bow, do it 100%. And when we realize we're not doing it 100%, come back to the bow. And in that way, our delusions are our teachers and supporting us. Those thoughts coming up, telling us that we're distracted, that we're not there, and giving us the opportunity to let go of them and awaken in that moment and do it again and again and again if we keep finding that we're not being present in our zazen or in our bowing, that we just keep coming back. And so we have to practice. From one perspective, yes, whether we practice or not, we're part of this reality. It's like grace. That's we're given that we're part of Buddha no matter what we do, or we're part of God, or we're a child of God, or we're part of the universe no matter what we do. And yet, the other perspective is if we don't practice, we're far away from that reality as the gap between heaven and earth. If we don't practice. That's another thing. That's what he's saying in this Prajnaparamita teaching, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Russ. Okay. Anything else today? We're way over. So folks are probably ready to go on with their day. As I said, next week, I think the Dharma talk is at 9:00 or at Great Tree Monastery. We'll put something out, I guess, we'll Facebook or email people, but it won't be the same time. I think it is Saturday. It's the 25th, which is Saturday. So I think it's at 9:00. And maybe we can put the Zoom link out there. We can send out the Zoom link, their Zoom link too. I think it's on their page though. I think if you go to their page, it's there, Great Vow Monastery. Okay, thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you again soon. May this merit extend universally to all, so that we, together with all beings, realize the Buddha way. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.